Welcome everybody. Uh, my name is Miguel Mostafa. I'm the current Associate Dean for Research and Innovation. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 2022 Ashtekar Frontiers of Science lectures that are presented by the Everly College of Science. As most of you know, this lecture series was founded by Professor Abai Ashtekar back in 1995. And this was very soon after he arrived at Penn State and as director of the new research center that subsequently evolved to become what is today the Institute for Gravitation and the Cosmos. And this series owes this success that it has over the years to the tireless efforts and meticulous planning of Barbara Kennedy, who presided over this series during the first 25 years. And this make it one of the most successful science outreach events in Central PA. So this brings me to today's lecture, which is presented by Dr. David Hughes. He's the Dorothy, Foehr, Huck, and Lloyd Huck Chair in Global Food Security at Penn State. His education includes a bachelor's degree in zoology from University of Glasgow and a PhD in entomology from Oxford. And while his previous research focused on parasite manipulation of host behavior, such as these famous zombie ants, his current research is in food security. Especially Dr. Hughes founded PlantVillage, a group that uses the power of technology, such as drones, smartphones, and AI, artificial intelligence, to identify plant diseases and help smallholder farms make informed decisions about their crops. So, Professor Hughes, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for the introduction, Tim for setting everything up, and for the entire organizing group for inviting me here to speak. It's a real pleasure to take part in this lecture series. I took part in one in 2012 when I had just arrived at Penn State under Barbara, and it was a real great pleasure. So thank you very much indeed. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And so this seminar series is about the application of artificial intelligence. And so today what I want to do is talk about our work in PlantVillage using AI in mobile phones to track plant diseases and improve overall food security. And so PlantVillage is a large coalition of people around the world who are working together to solve this fundamentally important problem, which is how do we help farmers cope with the challenges of climate change, but also pests, and leveraging the power of smartphone technology to do that. But before getting into how and we do the things, so how do we leverage artificial intelligence and technology in the cloud or technology in the phone, before we get into that, it'd be really important to set the scene and explain why we do what we do. And I'm very fond of using this picture to really drive home the point about the great inequity that exists globally. So I'm Irish, and this is my home country in 1849 during a tremendously impactful famine, which reduced the population by about 25%. This, of course, had an enormous effect on the United States because many Irish people emigrated. In the last census 10 years ago, about 40 million people had kind of written down that they had Irish ancestry. There's a very large impact on the United States because of this famine. It was one of the most impactful famines in Western Europe and modern civilization. And at the time, smallholder farmers throughout Ireland were eating tubers. In that case, it was potatoes, and they were digging them up from the ground, and they were finding that they were rotten, and therefore those families had no food upon which they could keep their families going. This is not dissimilar to what's currently happening in Africa. In Africa, a major food crop is cassava, and a major disease of that food crop is cassava brown streak disease, which is a virus. And so the situation really hasn't changed. You have smallholder farmers, predominantly older women, using technology like shovels or hoes in this case, and they're pulling up food from the ground, which they hope will be edible and maintain their family in good health. But what they actually find is that it's not. It's rotten and it's diseased on the inside. So it's extraordinarily striking to see that we really haven't moved on in this over 170 years, despite the fact that we can all converse today on Zoom, or we can have enormous amounts of technology within arm's reach, like the smartphone I can hold in my hand. These women are really left behind. And it's not just 170 years or so, it's actually much longer. So here's a friend of PlantVillage, the former US ambassador to the Rome-based agencies, Kip Tom. And here's a picture of Kip in Zimbabwe during his tenure in the Rome-based agencies. He went out to many different locations and he saw these women in Zimbabwe using technology. On the same trip, he saw a museum exhibit of the technology used in Zimbabwe in 800 BC. And so it's an incredible demonstration that for 2,800 years, we're not moving forward on the technology. And so PlantVillage exists to sort of redress this imbalance. Well, why not just let these individuals move ahead with the same pace of change? Well, because the world is changing and creating these enormous, enormous challenges. And so here is a really, to my mind, very stark demonstration of the impact of global climate change. This is a town in British Columbia in the Pacific Northwest during the last summer, 2021. And you can see the temperatures. Remember, this is the Pacific Northwest, it's in Canada, and the temperatures were 115 degrees Fahrenheit on one day, 118 on the next day, and on the third day, 121. And not surprisingly, this was a smashing of records every single day for 3 days in a row. And on the fourth day, the whole town burnt down because it had gotten so hot. A train had moved through the town, created a spark, and it was a tinderbox. And this, to my mind, is an extraordinarily dramatic example for a North American audience of the impact of climate change. I could have shown this picture. This is a picture from southern Madagascar, which is going through an extremely terrible drought, which has been happening now for 4 years. But I think we've all become immune to such images. It's really the image of a North America impacted by climate change, which is going to move us to tackle this enormous problem, because the global community has become extraordinarily good at ignoring the plight of Africa and the conditions on that continent. Climate change is not just about an increase in temperature, more flooding, more drought. It's also about the impact that climate change has on biotic stressors. So here's the story of the desert locust. So this is a solitary grasshopper that lives by itself, moves around throughout the Sahara, the Middle East. But when conditions are ideal, such as large amounts of rainfall coming into an area, large amounts of rainfall create large amounts of vegetation and the population builds up. So this solitary grasshopper switches its behavior and becomes literally the biblical plague of locusts. And in 2018, throughout what's called the hidden quarter of the Middle East in Oman and Saudi Arabia, cyclones came in and dumped enormous amounts of water into the landscape. And the reason we have more cyclones, and they're called hurricanes in this part of the world, is because the moisture in the air is increasing due to climate change, and then that moisture comes and dumps on the ground. And so then we have large amounts of water, large amounts of vegetation, and the locust crisis increased. And then there were subsequent examples of cyclones increasing the population. Some of these swarms were larger than a city, for example, larger than a city larger than Manhattan, but then the amount of food they would eat would be equal to the entire population of New York State. There's a tremendous amount of food that these organisms can eat, and it was a terrifying example of how climate change is really creating enormous stresses. And we'll come back to the locust crisis later on in the talk. But it's not just hotter temperatures or more droughts, it's also the effect that hotter temperatures and droughts and floods have on biotic stressors like locusts. So I talked a little bit about African agriculture, but this is sort of an archetypical example of what we might conceive of when we talk about American agriculture. So highly mechanized systems and highly productive systems. So we can think about huge outputs due to the application of research and technology, which of course comes from the land grant universities. That's why the land grants exist, established in 1862 under the Morrill Act by Lincoln in order to bring advanced research and technology to a growing nation, a new nation, which needed to grow more food for its ever increasing population. But as I said, that's not shared equitably. So here's a picture that's often used by the international community. For the life of me, I don't know why they use it. I think it's a shameful picture, but it's a woman on the slopes of Mount Kenya, an old woman forced to work in ways that old women shouldn't be forced to work. It's a picture by See It, which is one of the CGIR centers. And I've highlighted in red that what she's holding in her hand is a poor tool for the occasion, because I really like this quotation from Lincoln, who is, of course, the architect of the land grants. This is a picture of Lincoln on the mural of Old Main. If you haven't had a chance to see it, I highly encourage you to do so. And the quotation is that it really struck me. This is the second inaugural address to Congress in 1862. He's talking about the challenges of the Civil War at the time. But he talks about the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, we must think anew, we must act anew, we must disenthrall ourselves. And I think that the important point is climate change really has shown us that all bets are off. You know, if Canadian towns can burn down to the ground, or vast swathes of the western US are going up in smoke, or massive hurricanes are causing all the damages that inflicts upon us, that must mean we have to really understand the challenges at hand, and particularly understand the challenges for hundreds of millions of smallholder farmers around the world. So we must rise with the occasion, and we must think anew and disenthrall ourselves. I think it's for me a very much an idea that resonates and has resonated throughout the journey of PlantVillage. And that's what it was. As Miguel says, I came here to study ants and evolutionary biology. Quickly became enamored by the land grant model, but then quickly became disappointed. So this was the 2012 talk I gave. Why do we have this just for the citizens of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, or the citizens of the United States? Because we should think about ourselves as a 21st century land grant. And I know that's often something we put in our mission statement, but I think we actually have to really live that more concretely. We can, with technology, enable this global expanse. And that's the idea of PlantVillage, the idea that the phone in the hand of the farmer can lead to a land grant in a phone. The ability to have the sort of knowledge that a farmer in Pennsylvania can have from our extension services, you could have that knowledge in a phone, enabling decision making, particularly in a rapidly changing world. And so what does that actually look like? Here are two farmers, Rosalind. You'll hear a lot about Rosalind today. And Rosalind is one of our star farmers, but we have thousands and thousands of farmers like Rosalind at the moment. Now it's really expanded. But we all like Rosalind because she's been with us since the early start of our journey. And so we really started back in 2018 working in Kenya, trying to push forward the technology. Back in 2014, we had been developing some artificial intelligence to identify problems that one would see. And so this is work led by Pete McCloskey, our lead AI engineer, but it actually stretches even before Pete. Back to 2014, we were using technologies for those interested, one of which was called Cafe, and then we extended on to something else called TensorFlow. We got a lot of help early on from Google, and particularly them pushing some of their technologies called TensorFlow. So Google have really helped in able to put all of this into a phone. So what you're looking at now is an artificial intelligence system. Specifically, it's a convolutional neural network, and it's working inside the phone. And those little pink boxes that you see on the cassava leaf, they're identifying whether that leaf has the virus, in this case, cassava mosaic disease. And on the right-hand side, it's a different model, asking the question, does the leaf, in this case a maize leaf, does it have the telltale damage caused by a caterpillar called fall armyworm? And so this is not a photograph being taken by the phone. This is the phone using the videos, chopping that up into the individual frames. The convolutional neural network is working inside the phone. It's doing its computation. So you can think of this like a self-driving car driving up to a stop sign and knowing it's a stop sign. And so artificial intelligence is now so powerful that we can run it in a small device, and oftentimes we call it these edge devices. It could be a car, it could be a phone, it could be the scanner in the supermarket, and then it's able to do the things that previously only humans did. So previously humans would be the ones who would diagnose this problem. Before we started, we asked the farmers, we did a big survey, how many would understand this problem, and less than 5% did. They thought it was caused by too much sunshine, and then sometimes the disease would go away, and they thought that was going away with the rain, and they didn't understand what was causing the problem. And now the artificial intelligence is educating them on this, and so it's transparent. So as Rosalind is holding the phone, she's showing a following farmer. So Rosalind is a lead farmer, and she's showing a following farmer called Emiliana. She's showing her what the problem is. And so what's happening is that Emiliana is learning. And so inside the phone, there's a neural network, the model is built upon a neural network, which is a way in which we can train machines to do things. Of course, that's based upon our own neural network, our brain. And what we believe at PlantVillage is that the most important neural network on the farm is the one inside the farmer's head. And that's exactly reminiscent of what we've done in the land-grant universities. We went as an extension officer to a farm. We helped the farmer understand his or her problem, and then we left. We didn't stay overnight with the farmer. We didn't live with the farmer. We left. We educated the farmer. We left the knowledge with the farmer, and then we came away. And so that's what we're replicating here. In this case, Rosalind is bringing a phone to Emiliana's farm, helping her understand the diseases, the problems, and then she gets educated almost immediately. And she understands, because it's quite powerful to look at these bouncing boxes, and it's powerful to see where did the box go. And you'll see this now in another video. If the phone is moved, the boxes stop appearing. And so in this way, it's experimentation. The farmer learns adaptively and is able to see the issue as it's being developed. We were able to test this with colleagues from IITA, which is an institute as part of the CGIR, which is a global system of research centers that help people grow more food in the face of climate change, and they're a really large partner for us. And so they were able to establish that this AI system is twice as good as human experts, and that's really impressive. And the human people would be the extension workers that are present. So it's twice as good as the extension workers that one might find in Kenya. But the other problem is that there's just not enough extension workers in Kenya. So the ratio is one extension worker for maybe 3,000 farmers or 2,000 farmers. In some places like DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, it might be 1 to 10,000, who knows? And that means that farmers just don't get to see experts. But now, with a smartphone app running an AI assistant, it's able to do that. And I think this is Pete's foot here, as he was testing this in Tanzania, I believe. So that's what having AI means. It has an expert in your hand. And we can go through some other examples that we have. Before I wanted to go to the examples, I wanted to show you, this is Rosalind again. I wanted to show you that it's not just for Rosalind and Emiliana in this two-way interaction. It's actually something that impacts the broader community. So let me switch screens here, and I'll go on to, this is a BBC piece, which will be able to show us. Tim, I hope you can still see the screen. Let me know if you can't.
Looks good.
My name is Roslyn Akochi, a farmer in Western Kenya. The problem with cassava, it has got a lot of diseases.
Hi, I'm Nuru. I will help you inspect your cassava plant.
We call it Nuru, which means light in Swahili. It uses artificial intelligence to detect plant diseases and to connect farmers with people who can help.
Please show me first leaf that does not look healthy from the top of the plant, then press start.
This plant is affected, and this one will affect the other one that's near it. When cassava is affected with these diseases, it won't grow. It also affects the crops around, and we can't eat it. So what shall we eat?
Nuru is a smartphone app that uses the phone camera to scan the leaves for diseases, and the artificial intelligence will show us whether we have any disease or not.
Please show me 30 leaf that does not look healthy from the bottom of the plant, then press start.
Mama kijana jam.
Your plant, I think it has CGM.
Yeah.
Connect with other farmers and seed suppliers.
CGM.
Would you like to get advice on how to manage these diseases?
Yes. We are bright farmers. Can you clap for yourselves? Okay.
So yeah, Rosalind is wonderful. We'll come back to Dr. John Chalal, who's our Kenyan lead later on. He's critically important to our whole operation. So here are other examples. So let me just spend a moment on this. So early on, we just had a few phones, and we were getting more phones. Later on, we'll tell you, if you're interested, how you can help drive this through donations to provide more phones. But you can see all of a sudden the power of the system, because Rosalind is able to go around. She's gone to thousands of farms, and she's got thousands of people engaged, and they're learning through this advanced technology. And just like us in North America, as we're driving around, sometimes we know we're getting lost, but we're still following the advice that's coming from the smartphone on our dashboard. And it seems to be that humans are particularly susceptible to following the advice of machines in a variety of circumstances. And that turns out to be the case also here. And so this is one way in which we can see how it empowers whole communities. But the other is that it's just cool. If you're a subsistence farmer on a low amount of money, and the technology has up until now essentially been that hoe or shovel you've held in your hand, all of a sudden you're running around with a powerful phone, which is running a powerful AI system, and then you have local prestige. And Rosalind was also already highly prestigious, highly respected member of her community, but now it elevates her, and then she becomes a teacher to all the others. And that's why the lead farmer model, like Rosalind, with following farmers, is so impactful, and we can see the change spreading out. The Kenyan government recognized that our work in the county where we started, Busia County, was very, very impactful. It was driving actually the overall increase in the profitability of farmers. So it was nice to see that it's actually spreading out across communities. So I mentioned we'd see some other examples, and again, this is led by Pete with Serge Quadrago, who is the Associate Director of the Innovation Lab, and it's with partners. So one of the important points about our work is that we have to work with partners around the world. And we mentioned CJR, that large coalition of about 10,000 people working around the world helping smallholder farmers, and Jan Kreutz is one of our main collaborators there. And here what's happening is it's diagnosing late blight and early blight on potatoes, that iconic disease that caused the late blight, that caused the potato famine. So you can see that as it's moving, it's changing, it's diagnosing it, and you can see that it's able to train from one disease to another. And the rule that we have is that if the human eye can see it, then you can train the AI system to see it, but only if you work very, very closely with human experts. So essentially what we're trying to do is get the human expert into the phone. So it's a very patient, it's a very collaborative effort. So Pete has been particularly good at this in working with domain experts, that means experts on crops around the world, and very patiently. But the other thing that's very cool is that having done one, cassava and now potato, then you can expand it to lots of other problems because you go through that learning phase, and what you learned in previous trainings can help you in future trainings. So this is sweet potato. So we had cassava, which is a tuber, Irish potato, as it's called in Africa, as a tuber, and now sweet potato. In this case, it's quite a nice video because you can see that as it moves around, the boxes track. It's really important in this case that the farmers can identify which of the sweet potatoes are healthy, so they can replant from this. So that gives them an ability to make a proper decision about how they want to replant the crop and how they want to reduce the overall effect of diseases in their field. This is led by Pete and Serge, but also Matthew Correa, who's one of our Dream Team member, and I'll talk about Matthew, and he's also been incredibly important in the Irish potato work as well. And then also with the International Potato Center, and then people like Jan Kreutz, I mentioned, but Segundo Fuentes and Soledad Gamboa, and many, many others. Again, to reinforce the point that you need to have lots of people involved in training good quality images. Here's something that's very cool. So in the previous videos, Irish potato, cassava, and sweet potato, you saw these bouncing boxes, and that's called object detection. But what Pete has been driving forward now for the last year and a half, I'd say, is the application of something called segmentation. And this is sort of reinforcing the hunch that we had years ago, which is that the technology will get better and better and better. So what the artificial intelligence is going to do, this is a video that he made based upon a cloud system. So now the image goes to the cloud because it's a bit more powerful AI. But what would happen is that it's pretty cool. So what happens is the image comes into the cloud, and then the image gets chopped up into 9 different parts. And so Derek Moore, also on our team, was really, really critical to this work. And there's a lot of work that went on for this. Chops it up into different parts. And then each little individual part of the image is shown to the computer. And the computer goes pixel by pixel across the image. And it's trying to ask the question, is this pixel part of the disease that I've been trained to find? In this case, the disease is rust, which is a devastating fungal disease of wheat, and it's all over the world, and it's a huge, huge problem. This is work that we do with Dave Hodson at CIMMYT, again, one of those other CGIAR centers. And this is a video Pete made to kind of show that. And so at the beginning, you had just the image as we would see it, and then the image where the machine has picked it out. And you can see the machine has done a very good job of picking out the red areas which are rust. And that's really important because then we can have it in the cloud and we can signal, oh, we found rust, this is a huge problem, we have to make a move, we have to maybe do a genetic test of this or alert the local authorities. And so it's a more powerful system. It's called segmentation. And the segmentation actually has come not from our focus on plant diseases, but on food security and human health. So this is a project that we had with, or still have, with IFPRI, yet another CGIAR center, with Aolo Jelly and Bastien Koch and many, many others. And in this case, we're trying to help young girls, adolescents in Ghana and Vietnam eat better food. And this is an example of the machine being able to pick out from this image what is carrot in this case, but it's got a huge range of capabilities. It's able to pick out diets which are both Ghanaian diets, Vietnamese diet, and it's not only able to do that because we work so closely with nutritionists and people who work at universities in Ghana and Vietnam and cooking food and weighing the food and looking at the quality of the food. This AI assistant is now within 5 or 10% as good as a human nutritionist in not just recognizing the food, which is easy. The difficulty is not recognizing the food for people, but how much nutrients is in that food, how much vitamin B, how much iron, how much carbohydrates, how much protein. Of course, that's critically important for everybody in the world, but ironically, at the same time, we have lots of food insecurity, we have a lot of overeating, obesity, and then problems that are associated with that, particularly problems around anorexia and bulimia. And so what we really want to do is work with these international communities to help people eat better foods and help them go in a better direction. So the project is called Nudging for Good. How do we nudge people in a good direction? That's part of what's called behavioral economics. How do we help people eat better? And it's still we're still working on this. We're still doing school studies, but so far the indication is not only can we see what's in the food, but actually it is changing the behavior of young girls so that we can help them eat better food. Now, if you think, oh, changing behavior is really bad, remember that since Facebook was introduced as a mobile app, and since we have the proliferation of mobile phones, we have seen a dramatic increase in self-harm and suicide, particularly among young girls, particularly because of Facebook's acquisition of Instagram. So the effect of young girls, particularly of a smartphone, is enormous. And Facebook is run by a single individual who has illusions of grandeur of controlling the world, and this makes it unable for us to understand what the algorithm is doing. Because this algorithm is built at a university like Penn State in collaboration with universities in Ghana and Vietnam and an international group of scientists, we're all going to know how it works and how it behaves. So it's better that we work collaboratively through the university system to affect change rather than allow the continuation of a system which is just changing behavior so rich people can get richer at such enormous expense of young girls. And those in the audience who have teenagers, particularly girls, will understand the effect that smartphones are having. It's a very, very serious issue. So again, really striking home the point of when you have one AI model and one system of developing AI models, you can really put it to other uses. So really excellent work there. And we keep on going on. So this is some work that's just in development. It'd be really nice to know how many trees there are around farms in Africa. That's a very important question to ask because trees are providing shade to the farms. They help reduce the overall stress of climate change. Trees are places where we can get what are called natural enemies. So in this case, wasps, for example, or bats, which can come out and eat the insects which are damaging the field. So there's a lot of benefits to be had by having trees around. Trees, of course, are critically important for farmers in Africa who primarily rely upon firewood. 1/5 of a woman's week in Kenya is spent collecting firewood for cooking food for the family. So in this case, we have an input image where the humans, in this case, our excellent group of Penn State undergraduates, will annotate an image, and then the machine tries to pick it out. And you see this example here that I've got the mouse on. In this case, it has ignored the shadow but picked up the tree. So this is a very useful approach for us to help us understand how many trees, where they are, and how can we promote tree planting. And again, the possibilities are endless. We're starting to work with a group called Green Wave, which is growing kelp in the seas in the North Atlantic coast of America in order to help climate change, because kelp are really, really good at pulling in carbon. And so we're going to help them use a phone or some other tool, maybe it's a GoPro camera, to quantify how much kelp is on this and whether the kelp has any problems or diseases. Very important if it's February off the coast of Connecticut, when you're on the Atlantic, it's extremely cold. You don't want to be standing there holding a phone or trying to do this manually. Let the machine do it and let the AI help. So it's not just the ability to diagnose the problems. Here's Rosalind again. This is Rosalind, and then here's our friend who's also called Rosalind. You're also able to send information to the user. So in this case, we're able to use data from NASA on how well the field is growing in terms of biomass, and we can actually measure this across time. This is work really pioneered by Derek and Faye on our team, Faye Zhang and Derek Moore, who are PlantVillage engineers. And then with collaborators at Penn State, Amulya Yadav, Mariam Tabor, Mariam was a student of Amulya, and Xiaopeng Shen, and Tad is a student of Xiaopeng. And so collectively, we're trying to build in the competency of Penn State in terms of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So in this case, we could look at the decline overall, and then we could actually see that the field should have really been going upwards. This is March when you should expect this to go up, but it didn't go up, it declined. And this is because of two cyclones that hit in April and March and April 2019, and they hit Mozambique, which is about 800 miles further south than Kenya, but it still had an effect because it pulled all the moisture out. And again, these are effects of climate change. This is what's happening. More enormous storms are coming in off the sea, impacting the land. And we can see this on the farm in Kenya, allowing people to make adaptive decisions. And I'll give a little demo of this. So let me just exit here. So if you're one of the dream people who work with farmers, a dream team, we'll come on to those later on. If you're one of those people, you can go to a cloud system. So let's choose Brenda, who's one of our dream team members, and she has a bunch of farmers who she works with, and she can see the overall statistics of these farms. Anne is a farmer who has a phone. And so now we can click on the cloud system and we can see where that farm is, and we can see when it planted, in this case, April 12, 2021. And then we can see how well it's growing over time. And so cassava stays in the ground for a long period of time. And what just happened there is that we had information that we pulled from a variety of sources, the MODIS and Landsat satellites of NASA, but also data that's coming from meteorological records, multiple agencies like NASA, NOAA, the Climate Hazard Group in Santa Barbara, who are funded by USAID. This is all being pulled into our system, and it's been packaged together in what's called a cloud optimized geotiff. Again, excellent work, really driven here by Derek Moore and our team, but also with Fei Zhang. And so we can then run a crop water balance. So we can see how stressed this plant would be. It's not very stressed because there's plenty of rain. And this is looking at the above ground biomass. Now we can see how well is it growing and what are we expecting to get in terms of the yield from this. This is from a tool called Whopper, which is a UN tool that helps us understand this. This is a different satellite by NASA, soil moisture. We can also see this. How is the ground dry? Is it running out of water? Is it a drought? And there's not. It's actually very good here. It's around about 0.2. The forecast is actually to increase, and this is because the rain in the next 15 days is high in this particular area. This is coming from the European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast. So this is all coming together, and this allows somebody like Brenda to be able to send a message. So in this case, you could send a message. This is me just playing around with the system because I can't see her messages, but she could send a message to Anne and saying, hey, we think you're going to have stress, or we think you're going to have this amount of productivity. So really empowering people who work with farmers to have a greater reach and greater impact through cloud technology. So it's not just the phone educating the farmer, or the farmer with the phone educating her neighbor. It's the whole cloud system that allows decision making in the field. And so the picture we started off with is of a smallholder farmer holding a hoe, and now we have Rosalind again, very well dressed in the field, and holding her phone. And the way in which we could think about this is it's a satellite connected supercomputer driven by artificial intelligence that essentially is enabling time travel. It's enabling people to leap forward 150 years to come into the modern era. So that's a really, really powerful application and utility of the system. And so because of this utility, because of this application, we recently in October 2021, we were very successful in being awarded a Innovation Lab grant, and we're really honored for this. And this is a $39 million Innovation Lab grant to Penn State, with many collaborators here, collaborators with Michigan State University and MIT, many of those CGIAR centers, many groups in what are called Feed the Future countries. And this allows, again, Rosalind here with her phone, allows her to diagnose her problems, but then we can put on top of that technologies which are called integrated pest management technologies, such as the application of a parasitoid wasp to control the fall armyworm, which is one of those problems we saw earlier, or the application of what are called bioherbicides to kill a weed, which is a problem. And then the data from the phone can go to the cloud so we can make decisions, and that can integrate with the satellites we just saw. So all of this is that supercomputer idea. And then Rosalind, who has the phone, can help her network of following farmers, just like we saw in that BBC talk. But there's a bit that's missing here, and the bit that's missing is the dream team. And this is a crucial element that I really want to talk about, because while technology is wonderful, it's not going to go anywhere without the human capital, the excellence of our model, which is the dream team model. So I mentioned Dr. John Chalal here. Here he is. And so he's a professor at Moi University in Kenya, and we've been working very, very closely together for probably 4 years now. And his idea was, okay, let's leverage the power of these students. So he teaches students, and obviously the smartest people in any country that you're likely to find are young people at universities. And so he said, my students are graduating, but they can't go and get a job until they get their official diploma, and that takes a few months. So they have a period of time, maybe 6 or 7 months, where they're not able to go out into the workforce. Why don't we use them? And so we started off with this original group of 12, and then we expanded. And so what these young people do here, like Winnie here in the field, she's educating farmers on the use of the app, and this is where they might gather around, and we provide phones. And of course, these are farmers who are living in an analog world. They have less than $2.50 a day, predominantly older farmers, 83% of the women, and they're not used to using smartphones, of course. And so we do the education in their villages. We work with them to build that community. This is again the wonderful Rosalind here, building the community, because they trust Rosalind, and then Rosalind trusts the Dream Team members. And then we also cascade information out via SMS. And so fundamentally, what we're seeing here is that the whole thing, the ability to get smallholder farmers to work with these advanced technologies, is because of trust. And that's what the Dream Team members do each and every day, 5 days a week, now across 8 countries. They build trust with local communities. And these are much, much more important than the AI. The AI is fine, but it's the human intelligence and the trust and the empathy that these people bring. And I would want to really especially mention Annalise Keys here, who's really the sort of maybe an architect or a conductor of the whole operation, in that she really builds the sense of empathy, and she cascades this down such that young people like Winnie here in the picture rise up and establish themselves as members of the overall PlantVillage community in the same way Annalise is, and then they can train other people. So it's all about a cascading trust throughout the whole system, so we can empower people and then literally build a social movement. You remember we were in the locust areas, and a lot of that impacted northern Kenya. And so in this case, we wanted to establish a Dream Team model there and work on issues that really affect these people. These are incredibly impoverished communities in northern Kenya, places like Samburu, Marsabit, Turkana, which have typically less than $1.70 a day or $1.80 a day, very, very poor communities. And they're pastoralists, so they rely upon the animals for a source of wealth. They've been heavily impacted by first COVID and now climate change. And so what we do is we go around and help them deal with the problems of their community members. And this is work really overseen by Melody and Jeptu on our team, who worked on the locusts and now is helping the pastoralist community. And they're able to give drugs, they're able to work with the local communities, they work with the network of professional vets, they've had professional training on being able to report diseases. So really, really excellent ways in which they can help a very different community, which is the pastoralist community. We also set up a Dream Team in Burkina Faso. Serge, that I mentioned earlier, Quadrago, is from Burkina Faso, and he's the associate director, and he does a great job in reminding us that Africa is not Kenya, and there are many, many countries which really, really need assistance, particularly places in the Sahel, so from Mauritania to northern Kenya. But Burkina Faso is a country which has a long and proud tradition, but also is very impoverished. It's number 183 on a list of 189 countries, and it's a francophone country, so they speak French there, and it's more difficult, tends not to be worked on as heavily because of some of the barriers. And we thought, well, what the heck, it's a hard country to work on, so let's choose that because it's hard. And we work in Burkina Faso in order to help people there. We're just expanding like crazy. So this is the Mozambique team. This is John again, and they just had this is the Ugandan team, and this is John, but this was last week in Kenya. The Ugandan team came across the border to Kenya, trained with the Kenyan team, learned everything, and now are going back. So really, really excellent way in which young people teach young people from the continent. So this is the Uganda team. We're setting up a team with Ethiopia with an Irish charity called Vita and Aberminch University. I would stress just how impactful it is that we can set this up despite the current civil war in Ethiopia. Annika is a former Penn State PhD student, and she's gone back to Mozambique, and she's setting up a dream team there. We're working with a team in Tanzania through a charity, the Tanzania Development Trust, we're setting one up there, which is excellent. Through the Innovation Lab, we're setting one up in Honduras and Nepal, and Nepal, we're really fortunate to have Bapana Timislana on our team, and she's again a Penn State graduate through the College of Ag in their International Development Program for Agriculture, and she's really leading this with local knowledge, really excellent. So expanding broadly. So just to kind of reinforce the impact of these teams, let's kind of look again at the locust crisis that we talked about, where we had these enormous swarms moving over the landscape. And so this is Lake Turkana. This was January 2020. Large swarms. These are breeding adults, which are yellow. These are the immature stages, which are just running around the landscape munching. And these are the very mobile, immature adult stages, which are moving across landscapes and surprise farmers and eat all the produce. So the way in which locust tracking happens, so you need to track them before you can kill them, is through the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. And so this is Keith Gressman, a colleague and a friend I've worked with for many years. And what they have done in the locust crisis is mapped it. These are records from 1985 to 2019. And you can see that Kenya was devoid of locusts because they really occupied this band. Locust as a single species occupies about 20% of the world's terrestrial environment. And Keith had predicted that the locusts would move into northern Kenya in the late 2019, and they would come from this area of Ethiopia called the Ogaden Desert, and the winds would push them down. And that's exactly what happened. And these are newspaper reports of this. Kenya had not had a plague of locusts in about 75 years. And so everybody was panicked. It was very, very difficult to mobilize people. And there was a sense in which this is a huge challenge. How are we going to deal with it? And it was made much, much worse by the declaration of the COVID pandemic on March 11, 2020. So it was a crisis within a crisis. And this prevented international travel. The normal groups couldn't go there. The experts from, say, Somalia, or UN experts from Somalia or Ethiopia or Italy, where FAO is located, couldn't move effectively because of COVID. And so FAO asked us, because we're a UN partner, Penn State has a memorandum of understanding with the United Nations because of PlantVillage, and they asked us, can we spin up a tool to help them? And this is what we were doing. Frank Doyle on our team, very, very important. He's an Android developer, and he was trying to help us rapidly spin up a tool to help collect records. So this is one of our dream team members here. They would travel for maybe 100, 120 miles on motorbikes, going around the landscape and recording where they may find locusts. And in order to do that, they had to tap into Net2 satellites. So this is a tool on the top of the FAO vehicle that could link to a satellite. And Frank was able to engineer the phone and the app to get accurate records in the middle of nowhere, where of course you have no cell tower. So that was a really important component. Now, the other component was, how do we get the dream team members like Tyson here, who's doing a wonderful selfie here with the locust, how do we get him to understand the problems? Keith has been doing this for 35 years, and Tyson had just started. So we would use pictures in the app that would help them do this. But we were also able to leverage this AI system and our cloud system. So this is work really, again, driven by Pete, and just lots of undergraduates at Penn State who would label images and also go through the app, and still are going through it in order to identify what's a good image and a bad image. Really excellent work by the Penn State undergraduates. And this led to something called eLocust 3M, which is AI assisted classification of locusts. And remember, I mentioned those Dream Team members. It was important that they were able to go out. We had 52 scouts going out across the landscape. And this was then emulated by the Kenyan government, and they had over 1,000 scouts. So once we had shown a good model of young people with smartphones running around the landscape collecting data, and actually this is expanded now to over 16 or 17,000 scouts across all of the countries affected by locusts. We had a TV campaign with a local partner called Media Company in both Kenya, Ethiopia, and radio in Somalia, and we were reaching 16 million people every week with this. And then this led to coordinated spraying. And so the estimation by FAO, the United Nations, was that collectively, so our app and the planes and the pesticides and the control, collectively this saved the food for about 40 million people in the Horn of Africa in 2020. A crisis you probably haven't heard much about because of COVID, because our attention is being focused. We were really honored by Kip Tom, who was able to say that PlantVillage, from one of our US land grants, Penn State, has shown the important role of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, analytics, and satellite intelligence in cost effectively fighting the desert locust and other threats African farmers face. Data is critical for the current threat, but future ones, when they occur, we must measure and monitor digitally if we want to control it. So very important. This is the TV work that we would do. We could see this, where we could put out maps every week, and we continue to do that. We've gotten some important lessons. So we went through this period of explosive growth from December 2019 to 16 million people by the end of December 2020. So our vision, our dream is really coming true. PlantVillage is becoming a land grant in a phone. We're a partner with the UN agencies that have the mandate to help food security. We have the AI assistant, we have the cloud system. All those CGIAR scientists that we mentioned, they can collaboratively work together. We can deliver content on TV to 10 million people, 16 million people, also with SMS that we talked about earlier. And we have these experimental platforms and also the knowledge systems in place. And it's a suite of apps now. So this is led by Frank, but also an excellent partnership we have with Hoodies, which is a team of engineers. And they're really, really excellent in helping us really get out all the content we need to do and build all the apps and the cloud systems that we have. So what's next for PlantVillage? Well, what's next for PlantVillage is practically what should be next for every single person in the world, is how do we tackle climate change? This is the crisis that is just a defining one for every one of us. And this is a picture taken by Tyson in Samburu County, and Tyson's a really excellent photographer. That's the chap with the selfie of the locust. And here's really showing the dramatic examples of the desertification. So how can we use our technology to help in this regard? But one way in which we're doing that is tree planting. So here's a large effort that we've just started across Kenya and Burkina Faso, where we either have planted or are planting about 770,000 trees at the moment. We just started back about 4 or 5 months ago with that new position at the Huck Institute, that named chair. We're using the money in order to plant trees at scale. Remember, they provide a real strong benefit to the farming community because they reduce the wind coming onto the farm, they help the soil be stabilized, they reduce the temperature, increase the humidity, but they also provide money for farmers. Farmers can use them for selling for firewood, or they can use the trees for selling for poles or building material, or if the trees are fruit, they can also use that as well. But what we want to do is get the trees and turn them into this magical substance called biochar. So if you burn a tree or any wood or any biological material in a high temperature, about 400 degrees Celsius, and low oxygen environment, you create something called biochar. And this is a highly, highly stable form of carbon. Basically, it's like the graphene in your pencil, and it doesn't degrade. The half-life of biochar is about 1,000 years. But what is magical about it is it retains the structure the plant had when it was alive. So this is a eucalyptus bark or pine bark, and you have all these holes inside. And what happens then is that's where the water, when it does rain, can be stored. So basically you have a sponge in the ground that fills up with water, and that water is available to the plant roots. But not just that, because of some aspects of its electrical charge, it means that it's able to take nutrients, particularly ions like magnesium ion or calcium ions. It's able to hold them on its surface, and then the plant roots can more easily access that. So that's another benefit. All these holes are living spaces for beneficial microbes. Again, another benefit, and that's where the microbes give nutrients to the plant and they get carbon from the plant. So it's a really, really excellent tool. So it's a long-term storage of carbon. It's a tool that helps farmers combat with drought and also overall improves their soils. Nothing new here. This is a technology that people in the Amazon used 2,000 years ago to improve the quality of their soils. So it's a well-known, excellent system. And so remember those northern rangelands, which were highly impacted by the desert locust, the drought, and the COVID. Well, they're pastoralist communities. So one of the approaches we've been doing is removing this terrible invasive weed here, which is called mesquite. Basically, it has a huge root which goes into the ground and sucks up all the water. So the landscape is literally covered by straws, which are drying out the landscape. And so we hired these local community members who are really imperiled by the drought. We provide them money, and they go chop down all this stuff, and they turn this into biochar. And this is Tyson here, Foehr, who's leading this. And so in this case, we remove the landscape of the nasty weed, and then we can plant or put in the soil the biochar. And now we're replanting native grasses and native trees to build up the rangelands to help these community members continue their way of life, which is critically important. We've created a company to help drive this, because carbon, of course, can be sold on the international market. Biochar can be sold for as much as $150 a ton. So we want to enable a system where these farmers and pastoralists across the African continent can get money for offset for the necessity that companies in America or Europe have for offsetting their carbon. So we want to be able to drive money. For the first year, 2021 was the first year where the carbon markets went over $1 billion. In about 10 years, we're expecting that to be over $1 trillion per year. The necessity to pull down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere will lead to an industry that is bigger than the current fossil fuel industry. People at Penn State, like Tom Richards, are very engaged in this and thinking about it. And our own university is trying to offset its carbon as well. So you can check out that site, Carbon for Good. And really, by mentioning the pastoralists and the communities, it really reinforces our necessity and what we consider critical, which is to work with local communities. So these are Samburu, Turkana. This is kind of cut off at the bottom. These are Samburu people, Turkana, and the Rendille tribes of northern Africa or northern Kenya. But we want to work with communities across the entire continent. And this is something that Lisa Jackson really drove home. Lisa is a vice president of sustainability at Apple and was at Penn State a few years ago for a talk. And she really kind of encapsulates this effectively. The truth of the matter is that we can't have environmental protection unless those communities that are most vulnerable are protected as well. And I think that's really, really critical. And that really underscores what we do. We think about communities and we think about how technology can help those communities, but how those communities can help themselves. And that's essentially what PlantVillage is. It's a village of people across the world. The Dream Team is now over 110 people with these new groups. The Hoodies team that we mentioned is about 10. The Penn State team is about 12. Just an army of undergrads since we've arrived, over 220. Lots of international partners. This is not the full groups. Collaborators at Penn State, and also Sarah Ratmeyer, who's also an excellent collaborator. And then the people who give us money. The United States taxpayer, yourselves, through USAID, are funding this excellent work. Skoll Foundation, Schmidt Futures, really impactful, helping us early on. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and FAO, the UN agency. Penn State, particularly through the Huck Institutes, who really kind of kicked us off through their program, and then donors like Jeff Dean and Heidi Hopper, who through philanthropic donations give us money. And I think I want to mention this part because it's also an opportunity for you to give us money if you want to be part of this. Jeff and Heidi will graciously match any donations given to PlantVillage, and here's the link, up to $2.5 million. So this is a way in which you can impact the global communities and help smallholder farmers combat climate change through the application of artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and then perhaps most importantly, these young people, the dream team. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and I'm happy to take some questions.
I don't know if people can put the clapping thing, so I'm gonna do it for everybody. This is absolutely fantastic. Thank you, David. I think that there was while you guys start writing your question, there was a comment that summarized it. Joao Araujo. Probably my Portuguese is awful, so I apologize for that. But he says, that's such a beautiful, important, and inspiring work. Congratulations, David, and PSU for this initiative. So I think that this is absolutely fantastic. So while you guys put your questions, I let you know that we will have a survey right after you leave the Zoom. We would like to have some feedback from you. So while we wait for questions, David, I have a couple of questions myself. So you talk about the artificial intelligence, but that has to be trained somehow because it's not a person. So how much work was that? Isn't that something easy? I can imagine that there are animals or diseases that are even regional that you don't have samples from other parts of the world. So until you get that's a lot of work, I imagine.
Yeah, it is a tremendous amount of work, and that's why we're such a large team. And the good news is that it gets easier over time. So this is the way in which Pete has been able to organize things to add new models. So that's a good positive element. But also now, and also with technology, Google has made things a lot easier with its interface, and so we can also see a future whereby we can have local people in the countries training their own models or other scientists training them. So they're the ones who can access those fields with those other symptoms. And so we can empower individuals and democratize the access to this knowledge. And this is something that the Gates Foundation is very keen on supporting us to do. So I think it was hard, but it's perhaps no harder than being a smallholder farmer facing drought. So we're fortunate, and we can do that hard work because it helps them.
Thank you. So we have a question from Diana Bering. What are some of the roadblocks that you worry most about when you trying to realize the full potential of PlantVillage?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think it's the fact that we're disorganized as a global community. Look at the absolute train wreck of a response we've had to COVID, both in this country but also globally. As an international community, we decided that people in Africa don't deserve vaccines, and we didn't give it to them. We let vaccines go expire. We didn't give it to them. We kept them for ourselves. We hoarded them. The European Union and America and others were in a competition to suck up all the resources. And what happened? We got Omicron. Predicted by the scientists at Penn State who studied this sort of thing. It's quite obvious. And so if we can't respond effectively to the pandemic, for which we had lots of warning, how are we going to respond to the gross issues that will arise because of global climate change? And I don't think the international community is able to do that. So I think the fundamental barrier is how and at what speed can we get the farmers on board? I have 2 kids. I particularly care about them. These farmers have kids. They care about them. So we need to put the power of change in the farmers' hands and local communities. And so the barrier is how quick can we do that? Because the lesson from COVID is that the international community does not care and is unorganized and has too many elbows. Hopefully COVID will teach us lessons, but I don't know if we're all taking that away from us. I guess one lesson from COVID is that we can leverage platforms, but the biggest barrier is how quickly can we get across the world. We talked about Kenya and elsewhere, but we need to be in Chad, Nigeria, DRC, Congo. We need to be in these places as soon as possible.
The other question from Ty Butler is about the distribution of biochar pasture. So he's asking, are the biochar pasture efforts being conducted with transhuman pastoralists or with ranchers?
Well, we don't have ranchers so much in these. It's mostly just individual small groups of people with small herds, maybe 20 or 30. And so what we did was and multiple tribes, and so what we did, and we worked with the elders of these communities to ask them what they care about, which areas were problematic, so they identify them. So it's mostly just a small groups of pastoralists. The land is communal, so we need to get everybody's buy-in as we do this. So that's what we're going forward. So not ranchers, but more just people who use animals as a form of agriculture in a nomadic landscape.
So the other question, I have a similar question. So Ken and Alma Mathis are asking about your plans for expanding into Central American countries. I think you mentioned Honduras, for example, and I can imagine that all the situation is completely different from all your experience in Africa. So it's not simple. So
no, this is one of the wonderful things about the Innovation Lab. It gives us a mandate to expand. So the Innovation Lab is focused on Central America and the Caribbean. So it's Honduras, Guatemala, and Haiti. But it doesn't. We don't have to stay with just those countries, of course. We can expand, and once the app has already been translated to Spanish for Honduras, and of course then once we figure out some of the issues, you're right in that the farmers are very different there. The average income of a Honduran farmer is about $2,500 a year. An African farmer is about 100, 250, 350, depends. And so in those cases, there's different challenges, but essentially we're finding that the similarities are greater than the differences. So we have unemployed young people, we have farmers with lacking knowledge, and we have crops that generally have the same problems. So coffee, for example, in Honduras is important. Coffee in Uganda is important, and both are affected by, excuse me, a rust, which is problematic, and other problems. But so once we build a model for that, it'll be used in those other locations. Climate change is everywhere. So one of the things that we've done now is take our ability to forecast, and we now provide maps to Honduras and Uganda and Kenya. Again, you know, that's the beauty of technology. Once you build a system, it can be used elsewhere.
So there is another question, but it's long, so I'm trying to read it.
Right. So I can answer Loretta's question. So the question is if we're cutting trees, if we're planting trees to stabilize the soil, isn't that a paradox in that we cut them down and then burn them? So we're very mindful of that. It's a very important question. So what we want to do is plant the trees and then have a succession. So we always have trees on the borders. And when a tree gets to be maybe 6 or 7 years old, it'll be cut down and created in the biochar, but there'll be a tree that's 6 years old and 4 years old right behind it. So we'll always have this living border on the trees, on the borders of the plants, on the borders of the farms, and the biochar will go into the soil to stabilize it. So we'll continuously do this research for development and experimentation to make sure we're able to keep the soil stable. So it's a very important question. But the beauty of the system is also that these Dream Team members in our journey for a tree plantation, they're all agroforesters. The previous Dream Team had general skills in agriculture from their degrees, but we specifically targeted people who have degrees in agroforestry from Kenyan universities. And so they know what they're doing, which is really perfect. And then we work with the Kenyan Forestry Service, who know what they're doing. And we want to make sure that we're not, inadvertently creating a problem, but very important issue, Loretta.
So I also have a question because I have some kind of a similar experience. You mentioned trust, and I think that this is fundamental to your work over there, to work with people there and get all this done. Without that trust, it would have been impossible. how do you start? I'm pretty sure that these people were not used to dealing with scientists that are working on with something. They are used to other kind of people that say, "Oh, I'm going to help you," but they have other interests, and so it isn't it hard to create that trust from the beginning?
I guess you've answered the question in that you say, "I'm going to help you," whereas the real important question is, "What do you need?" And that's what we've always done. We went in there and said, what do you need?" And they might say, "We have a problem with this or that." And oftentimes, more often than not, our answer is that we don't know what the answer is. Whereas a lot of people in the development space, they don't spend time with the farmers, but if they do, they go in there with the idea that we're going to tell you what to do and how to do it. I'm really delighted to see on the call people like John Maeka and Bonfis, who are part of our Dream Team members, and it's always listening, constant listening. And I thought a little bit we had to um, listen less and move more. But I was wrong. It's really, and this is really a point that Annalise has driven home. We really do, it's a feature, not a bug, to spend time listening to people, because that's where the trust comes from. And it's just excellent. It's really wonderful that the communities are so receptive, and we're every day getting stuff wrong, but that's the nature of success. It's a history of failures. But I think the trust is built up there and it's very, very strong. The other thing I would say is just the wonderfulness of having these young people, these dream team, because they often overlap in age um, with the sons and daughters of the farmers we serve, and in this case, they have this natural trust inbuilt, even compared to John Shalal, who's from Kenya, highly respected. He himself, he's on the call. He himself admits that yeah, they trust the dream team more than they do because he's a little bit older than them, and so on and so forth. We were extremely happy recently that we just brought on board the first child of one of our farmers. Her name is Fate, and she had gone off to university to study issues around gender, and now came back, and she's a daughter of Consolata, one of our important lead farmers. And now Fate is critically important. There's a USAID Innovation Lab. She works with Paige Castellanos here and Janelle Larson on our gender studies for the Innovation Lab. But who better to work on gender studies than a young student who's from the community? And so it's just obvious to do that. The other obvious reason why what the Dream Team model is important is economics. Um, a consultant from USAID, World Bank, FAO, etc., they might cost $650 a day. Periodically go to the country, spend most of the time in a hotel. We get 37 young people for that price, and they spend 5 days a week with the farmers. So economically, it's just a better model. Thanks.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if there are any more questions, I want to thank David again. Excellent talk and amazing work. I'm so happy. I learned so much today, and it's absolutely amazing. So thank you very much. And before you leave, I want to tell you again that when you leave the webinar, there will be a survey right after you leave, or with an email within the day. And so please fill it up, and it will take a minute, and give us feedback, because that will help us for future lectures. And next week, the webinar will be at the same time and with the same link. And the topic will be machine learning for bioinformatics and weather prediction. And it will be presented by Dr. Jia Lee. So again, thank you very much, David. Thank you all for your attention, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.